During the late 1800s and early 1900s, the Gari people were led by Ali Abdi. He served the Gari people during the most difficult and volatile time in the history of East Africa when they were attacked by their former allies. Between 1906 and 1907, they were attacked by the Orlehan and the Meherhan from the north and east respectively. Gabar Bar Ma'ad's firstborn son was killed and 250 of his cattle were looted by the Marehan. In 1912, the Digodia, ex-Gershagat, seized the opportunity and joined the Orlehana and Meherhan fighters in their fighting against the Gari people. Then, two Gari leaders Ali Abdi and Shaba Alio recruited the Tigray and deserters from the Ethiopian army to fight back and destroyed the allied Somali fighters. They also killed Captain Aylmer in 1913 while he was aiding those allied fighters. Later, these two Gari leaders were accused of harboring and sheltering Ethiopian mercenaries and were arrested and deported from the Gari district to Nairobi for a year. Between 1913 and 1914 were another volatile period, and the Gari were raided from every corner of the Gari district by the same allied Somali clans. They lost over 100 of their men. Subsequently, Gabar Bar Ma'ad assumed a leadership position and defended his people. A year later, Ali Abdi was released from prison, and upon his release, he transferred his power and appointed Gabar Bar Ma'ad as the supreme leader of the entire Gari tribe. British mercenaries attempted to enlist him and even paid him £200 for the loss of 250 of his British mercenaries attempted to enlist him a little earlier in 1907, but that did not persuade him to abandon his people. Beginning from 1913 through 1920, and even paid him £200 for the loss of 250 of his three. It was a period of instability with sporadic and heavy fighting between the Gari and Somali intruders, including Digodia, Meherhan, and all the cattle earlier in 1907, but that did not persuade him to abandon his people. Beginning from 1913 through 1923, it was a period of instability with sporadic and heavy fighting between the Gari and Somali intruders, including Digodia, Meherhan, and Orlehan. However, the Gari people under Gabar Bar Ma'ad's leadership prevailed against all odds and became the superpower. Sultan Gabar Bar Ma'ad was said to be short and small in stature, but described as undoubtedly a great fighter with a great personality, regional super, and strong character. He was feared by his enemies and admired by his people and his allies. The Gari also fought against the British occupying forces and the Ethiopians whenever they felt they were being threatened. In 1923, British mercenaries attempted to collect and Gabar Bar to tribute by force from Ma'ad was said Gari to be short and small in stature, but described as undoubtedly a great fighter with a great personality and strong character. He was feared by his enemies and admired by his people and his allies. The Gari also fought against the British occupying forces and the Ethiopians whenever they felt they were being threatened. In 1923, British mercenaries attempted to collect a tribute by force from the Gari. The Gari supreme leader Gabar Bar Ma'ad aka Muhammad Ma'ad, birth name, strongly objected and rallied against Britain's attempts to forcefully collect tributes and conduct registration. Subsequently, fighting ensued in which 9 Gari warriors were killed and Gabar Bar Ma'ad was arrested. He was released later on, and upon his release, he allied with the Ethiopian emperor and moved the Gari people to the Ethiopian side of the border, where he was welcomed by Fitorari Angasu, the Ethiopian officer in charge of armed forces at that time. The Gari settled near Kadaduma, and Sultan Gabar Bar began working against British interest, and the British mercenaries described him, Gabar Bar Ma'ad, as an infernal nuisance. He died in 1935. Upon his death, his son Hassan Gabar Bar assumed leadership and carried out the fight against Britain where his father left off. Unlike his father, Hassan Gabar Bar, Haji Hassan Gabar Bar did not ally himself with the Ethiopian emperor, but he did maintain a friendly relationship. In 1936, an Ethiopian officer in charge by the name of Razdasta accused the Gari people of being collaborators with the Italians and began harassing them. Soon fighting erupted between the Ethiopians and Italians. Razdasta's army was defeated by General Augustini with the help of the Gari militias. The Gari militias were given a task to dismantle and break up the civilian administration assembled by Razdasta at Malka Marie. They accomplished it swiftly and quickly. As a result of the Gari warrior's accomplishment and his leadership, Haji Hassan Gababa was appointed with the rank of Vitorari in 1936 by the Italian General Augustini in recognition of his contribution and leadership. He continued working against the British intruders' taxation without representation and protected the Gari people. The British mercenaries described him in their report titled Resume of Gur History Appendix C, page 93, paragraph number 11. Hassan Gababa remained a thorn in our flesh. In 1941, he was captured and arrested by Britain mercenaries and was imprisoned at Werja for 2 years and then transferred to Malzabit, where he served time until 1945. Upon his release, he contacted Emperor Haile Selassie and he was welcomed by the emperor. He retained his title as Vitorari and served his people, representing Gari people living in Ethiopia. He became the members of the Ethiopian parliament and continued working relentlessly against British interests and blocked every proposal made by the British mercenaries, including the demarcating of the Ethiopian-Kenya border line. He was a staunch supporter of the Greater Somalia and played a big role for their independence until his death in 1962 by Haile Selassie I.